Morning, Ty. How are you?
Hey, Layla, you there? I'm gonna get started. Um, I'll share my screen in a second. But Jamesia, nice to see you, and Linda, and Sharice and everybody else. Layla, a pleasure. Nancy, how you doing? I feel like you remember that romper room in the 70s, and they'd say hi to everybody. They
Well,
say,
it was good morning. You know what is it? I see Jamie, I
yeah,
see Kathy, I see
I
Bob.
just need some flowers that talk and laugh and smile.
Yeah.
All the younger folks are like, what the heck is Ty
I was
talking?
just going to say, you guys are so dating yourselves, but I'm loving it.
Do you know what I? Oh my goodness! Welcome, welcome. And Joe is coming in. Um, uh, interestingly, Joe. Everybody, how I like to before we start, I like to I like to ask, hey, anybody have anything interesting that happened? Hey, Joe, it's good to see you.
Morning.
Good morning, Joe. Let me ask you. Great discussion that you and I had, and I loved that issue. Do you want to save it for when we have like because it should be it's that's not 5 minutes,
Yeah.
because man, it could easily be an hour. But why don't now at this point everyone's like, well, what is it? So why don't you tell everybody what it is and tell them what happened, and then we'll talk on it like in
Yes.
depth. Yeah.
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll try not to get too winded on it. So I, I'm a mediator, but I'm also a carrier representative in Department of Financial Service mediations. So typically, when we enter an agreement, depending on my client, they may require certain confirmation of the settlement. So, and this is a great discussion too, because many of the things that I took away from Ty in our discussion were really focused on what the mediator's obligations and responsibilities are to ensure that there is a meeting of the minds on the settlement. So, what happened was uh, I reached an agreement on a certain amount. Let's call it $19,000. Okay. And so when we used to meet in person, or when we used to have mediations in person, you would sign some type of mediation agreement. It would be drawn up by one of the parties, maybe the mediator, and both parties would sign it. And so now you have a written document confirming the settlement. I have certain carriers that don't really care about that. Uh, I have many mediators that don't care at all about having anything in writing. Some are very adamant about them producing their own document to ensure that there is a meeting of the minds of the conditions or the amount of the settlement. So, this particular client that I work with has an actual paragraph that I cannot alter, and you put in the payees and also the amount. So this was with a public adjuster and a policyholder, and I thought it was one of those mediations that both sides felt like they didn't think they got enough, and we thought we paid too much. I guess that's what they call a successful mediation. So let's call it $19,000, so it's not exact of what it was, but it was one of those where I said, we have to be under 20. He was like, okay, well, let's do 19. So we did 19. And when I sent the mediation agreement, it wasn't an agreement, it was just an email with the body of the language. I actually added two extra zeros, and it was $19 million. So I didn't catch it, and I don't know that the public adjuster caught it, but he replied back and says, accepted, thank you, Joe, with exclamation points. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I paid too much on this one, So anyway, didn't think anything of it. I uploaded the document to my client's portal. and I gave them a narrative of the results and said we agreed at $19,000. So a couple of weeks go by, and my client calls me and goes, "Do you remember this case?" And I said, "Sure, I kind of remember it." She goes, "Do you remember what you settled for?" And I go, "Well, I have to pull it up." He goes, "Well, take a look at your mediation agreement." And I looked at it and I went, "Oh, well, that's not what we agreed to. I don't know that anybody's ever agreed to a $19 million property case." So he goes, "Well, he's called us and said that his client's pushing to enforce the settlement for $19 million." So I puckered up like nobody's business at the beginning. So I started calling all my friends. I called Ty. I called everybody. "Please call me. Let me know what you think." And everybody that I talked to, except for one person, said, "This is ridiculous. It's a Scrivener's error.
Nelson was
It's
right.
not enforceable." So I reached out to the mediator and I said, "Hey," and I forwarded him the document and I said, "Hey, these guys are trying to force the settlement." He goes, "Absolutely. That's not what I recall. Matter of fact, I still have my notes, which, we're always taught to destroy your notes after mediation." So he put in writing, "No, this is not my recollection of the mediation. It was 19,000." So a week or so goes by again. My client says they haven't returned it. So I email both the public adjuster and his client and say, "Look, obviously this was a Scrivener's error. We agreed to this. I hope you won't make a big stink out of this and sign the release." So then he calls me and goes, "Oh, we have a good working relationship. I know you've, helped us out in the past. You get things settled. And, this is not me pushing. This is him pushing. And, I've referred him to an attorney." And I said, "Well, I tell you what, guys, I'm pretty ticked off because you know good and well what we have settled at. And if I have to spend one red cent defending myself on this," I said, "it's going to be scorched earth. I said, this will really affect our relationship." And he was like, "It's not me. I didn't do that. He's the one that's doing it. He didn't like the settlement amount. He thought he should have gotten more money." I said, "Well, then you guys shouldn't agree to it. You didn't have to agree to it." So make a long story short, they ended up settling and paying, and then signing the release, and we settled at 19,000. But for this, we entered into this agreement December 11th, and they just signed it this week. So it took a while, but I was very concerned. And so my questions to Ty was, number one, is this really enforceable? I did put it in writing, but it was such an egregious difference that it just didn't make sense. And number two, could they compel or could I compel the mediator to testify? Is that a confidential uh, discussion, that arose out of the mediation process
No.
or out of the mediation, discussions? So those were my discussions that Ty and I had earlier this week.
The
Nelson,
amount is not
we can hear the
confidential.
background, Nelson, FYI. That's
Oh,
why
sorry.
it's okay.
The amount is not confidential
Why is that, Nelson? That's right.
because the amount is not something that was revealed to you in confidence during the mediation, and it's also, more importantly, part of what you report.
Oh, that's something else entirely, and you'll see what I mean
Okay.
by that.
Yeah.
But in
When you
essence,
do
it
a
was agreed to.
mediation, first of all, it was agreed to. It's
Right.
part of the contract between the parties.
No longer
But
confidential.
But when you report, and again, I'm going to use New York, but when you report to a judge in a regular mediation, the only thing you're allowed to put is whether the case settled or not, and if it settled, the amount. And that's it. And those things are not part of the confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I've dealt with Joe, and he's a very tough representative of the insurance company, and I'm a very pushy mediator, okay? Because I like to settle cases. Joe, it's all right. I'm not offended by being pushy. I've had mediation with Joe. So
As have I.
the
He's actually quite awesome. Yeah.
the but okay, the problem here
Mm.
is that people make mistakes because people are human. And somebody who would not speak to their client and say, look, this is not right. You are not doing this.
That's right.
You are not screwing this guy. This guy is a stand-up guy, okay? And if you ever need me again, you're going somewhere else if you screw this guy, okay? I'm sorry. I'm from New York. This is how I talk,
Well,
okay?
let's be honest. That's how you should. But that wasn't.
And
But they're not an
and
attorney. That's a
I really want to know, and I
public
know
adjuster.
Joe is not going to tell me. I really want to know who the hell it is. It's probably one of these Miami guys, if I had to guess. Okay. I hate to say it, but I stopped doing these
Well,
because
but
I
I
can't
hear you.
it's a
I
quick and
hear you.
easy 300, but I stopped doing them because some of these PAs are
Mhm.
just so freaking obnoxious.
They are.
And even
Some of
some
them.
of the insurance companies
Some of
are.
them. Yeah.
Their scheduling people are not too nice. And
Yeah.
so
That,
I
that's
don't
right.
want my retirement
Hmm.
messed up because I had 30 years of dealing with difficult people in the New York
I
court
know,
system.
I know. But
So
that is the job of the mediator, and we have to deal. Linda, I'll be right there. And I love, Nelson, your perspective, because let's be honest, it gets frustrating sometimes.
the fact that the case was settled and for how much is
I
not
know. It
confidential.
is not. It is not. It is not. And Nelson, you typed in, um, it's a scrivener's error. It's a scrivener's error, right? But really fast, to your perspective, there's the homeowner though. Like, we can still, we have to deal with crap sometimes. It is what it is. But you know what? You may not want to. That's the other good thing. Nelson, he doesn't have to if he doesn't want to, right? You can deal with the kinds of cases you want to deal with, the kinds of parties you do or do not want to deal with. Let's be honest. But it is part of the job. Sometimes I would say, hey, Nelson,
I have a list of PAs that I won't deal with.
I have a list of attorneys that I won't necessarily deal with.
All
Nelson, do
right.
me a favor. When you're not going to say something, just mute yourself for the
Yeah.
background noise. Thank you, sir. Be right there, Linda. And but so what was great about this one, Joe, and I love that you brought it up, and they're all, there's no mistakes, there's good learning opportunities, and whether it's we do something or what somebody else does, and there was something that somebody else did here, and that was, this public adjuster, there were some really great learning opportunities as well, right? The big one is when you're the mediator, you should write the amount out, the actual amount in letters, right? You should write it out, and you should also put in the amount in its numerical value, right? This way, which one are they going to look at? They're going to look at the written out amount over the written amount, and it will help. One, secondly, the mediator in this instance, what they didn't do was, Nelson, I'm going to mute you. You'll unmute yourself. What they didn't do was, in their mediator report, they didn't write out what it was that I will write out. The parties met for mediation. The parties agreed that this and that and that and that and the other thing, right? And then you're supposed to send it to the parties. That didn't happen either. That would have cut this off, would it not have? It would have. So
I
great.
send an email
Yeah.
after each mediation. I send the parties an email saying this is to confirm that the case settled for X amount of dollars after the
We're
mediation.
supposed to. We're supposed to, right? Thank you, sir. Linda and then Don. Joe, this really was a great. We could spend an hour on this one alone. Really, really good. Linda, go ahead, please.
Well, I have a couple of comments, and you touched on one.
Great comment, by the way, that you put in. Go ahead. I loved it.
As many years ago, when in a different life, I was a bank teller, and of course, at that time, people were writing a lot of checks, and that's how you paid your bills and so forth. And it has always stuck with me that one thing I learned is that they will always 100% of the time take the written verbiage over the numerical.
Yes.
And so if there's ever a mistake, it's going to be the written, and that's why you put them in the mediation agreement.
Yes, that's right.
Now, here's my question or my curiosity. Because this went from 19,000 to 19 million, it's obvious that there was a total mistake here. But had this gone from 19,000 to 190,000, would there have been a harder argument?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, it's still a scrivener's error. I mean, it's that easy, right? But I love the question. What if it would have just been an extra 30,000 or what have you? Really, I think the point of the matter, the learning, and then Don, I'm going to give it to you, is, hey, there's some simple things a mediator can do to kind of make sure this doesn't happen, right? One would be write it out, just like Linda was saying, write it out and have the numerical value. One. Secondly, we should, when we report for in this individual case, Nelson was absolutely right. When we report to the courts, you have to be very careful on what your mediated report says. Your mediated report has to be very, very simple. But this was an administrative case, right? And the Nelson saying, and the email comes after. I couldn't agree more. You're right. But after we do the mediator's report it's not only is it in your opinion, but it's actually part of the administrative rules for DFS. We are supposed to do both. So I will write out my mediator report, mediation disposition form. I'll send it in to the DFS. Immediately, it comes right back to you. And then I save it in the file on my computer. And then I'll send an email, just like Nelson is saying, to the parties. I'll say, great job, everybody. I just want to confirm that. And then I'll write exactly what I have in my mediation disposition form in the body of the email. And I'll say, and I am attaching my disposition form for your, respective records. That's what we're supposed to do. And had the mediator done that, this would not. Remember, had Woody gone straight to the police, this would never have happened. Again, I'm dating myself, right? If the mediator had done their job better, this would never have happened, is the point. And this is what I love about it is we learn from these issues, right? It's a great example. Don, what were you going to say, sir? Thank you for waiting. You're on mute now, sir.
I said this is the perfect time of the year to bring this up because, a simple little mistake can be just putting in the wrong year. As we go from 24 to 25, one of the things I know when looking at settlement agreements is looking for, because I actually typically have, like in the small claims and stuff like that, I have the attorneys fill out that part of the settlement agreement. And you have to take a look at the year that the wrong year. I've seen people put 26 or 27, which is a couple years in the future by mistake. But as a mediator, we do have to take those extra steps to be aware of common mistakes that can be made, such as the amount, such as maybe dates the payment is due. Because if it puts 27, all of a sudden, hey, I don't have to pay you till 27. And as noted here by other folks, a party could seize on that.
They could try.
They could try, but that trying could cause delays. As Nelson said, well, I won't deal with those people. Well, if somebody believes, well, instead of 19,000, I could get 19 million. I don't care who I lose as a friend.
Yeah, but now a pro se, an unrepresented party, okay, maybe they can run with that fallacy for a while, but a professional should know better. And this is what's pissing Nelson off so much. And I get it. It is infuriating sometimes, but like it comes with the job. But I don't know where they got their license or their certification, but if you think there aren't now to a much lesser extent, but you will even have attorneys who I can't believe that they're doing this. Doesn't happen often, but I have been very surprised. Anyway, the point of the matter. Oh, Nancy, please. Thank you for that, Don.
I've actually got a situation going on that's very similar to this, where the agreement that has been reached is unclear, and it's not the kind of agreement that any person in their right mind would agree to. The person that contacted me is trying to run so far with this settlement. It was a settlement done through email, which is always dangerous. But the terms are not agreed to by the parties, and one of them is now threatening to try to enforce this settlement. And there is a lot of case law. There is case law that says that a settlement like this is that you can set aside a settlement, and it's not so. I don't know how to say this. They're not the settlement agreements, once they're signed, are signed, but when they're clearly erroneous, they are not in all likelihood not going to be sustained or enforced.
The court could do that. Absolutely.
But especially something like this, where the case that I'm working with right now, I seriously the person that's trying to enforce this settlement is convinced that he's right, and this settlement should be enforced, and the difference is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And he thinks that because of a mistake in drafting, that this is going to be enforced. And I'm trying to, encourage him to think about this and think about what was actually intended before he tries to enforce an unreasonable settlement, because there is case law that they will consider what actually happened and what the intent of the parties actually was in trying to enforce the settlement.
Yeah. Two questions, Nancy. So you see what a great subject. I told you, Joe, this was going to be a great subject. Is that an unrepresented party?
No.
Wow. Oh,
They're
see,
both one is a
Wow.
lawyer who represented himself, and the other is a real estate developer with a lawyer. And they both missed this, and now they're back and forth as to what the agreement actually is now that it's been signed and the check's been cashed. They're arguing over what the agreement actually was.
Okay, who wrote the agreement, Nancy?
They kind of the two lawyers wrote it through email.
Oh, that's right. You
Very
mentioned that.
bad choices all the way around, but and the question is whether this case is going to be dismissed with prejudice or not, and what that dismissal actually means, because nobody thought about it when they were having their back and forth dealing with this mortgage foreclosure action, the full scope of what they were talking about. So it's a really big mess, but the fact is that there is still a way to set aside a settlement that is not what the parties agreed to.
That's right. And others could be fraud. Others could be if the parties, one of the parties was being forced, right? And so they didn't have full their self-determination wasn't intact, something of that nature,
And
or something
inadvertence
like
is also
Yes.
one of the reasons that a settlement can be set aside. When it's the terms are clearly not what the parties intended. Inadvertence is part of that. So it's like we need to be super careful when we draft stuff. We need to be sure to the best of our ability that we say what we mean and we mean what we say.
Yes.
But even when a mistake is made, it's not necessarily fatal. And that was kind of the big picture here. It's a ton of work, but for $19 million, you could do a ton of work. It's like, so it's not without hope if a mistake is made, but the better practice is just to go ahead and get in the habit of writing out, how much the dollar amount is, and being very specific about what is going to happen, who's getting what,
Who,
and
what, where, when, why.
absolutely to have
over general language. Yes, ma'am.
to basically write an enforceable agreement that everybody signs. And when I do family law stuff and other things like that, it's like when I talk to people, we're going to talk about being specific enough and writing this in a way that if it had to be enforced, that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of confusion about what we were asking a court to do.
Agreed. Well, let me before I give it over to Nelson and Linda, so well said. But I heard something else that's interesting, and that is, so there was a mediator, there was a mediation, and the agreement continued to be drafted by attorneys via email. Now, if you're the mediator, this may happen sometimes. And so the question then is, well, how best do I facilitate the creation of that email agreement? Should we still stay involved? And if we do, then should we not? Is there a way that we can help overcome this? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. But the rules do say that we're supposed to ensure that we oversee to some extent. And I'm not going to be able to give it word for word, but we're supposed to, be able to ensure that the process is taken care of appropriately through the signing, right? And so, could the mediator have helped somehow? Right? FYI, is because we will have agreements. We will have agreements through email once in a blue moon, right? Can the mediator help the parties, and what does that look like? We need to be concerned about that. FYI. Were you going to say something, Nancy, before I give it over to
well,
Nelson?
just that in this particular setting, the party there was not an agreement at mediation. The parties
Right.
continued the discussions because they couldn't get there at mediation, but they didn't want to litigate. So even after the mediation, everybody's prepared to litigate, and they're still talking back and forth. So
Right, but
it's
through the mediator or not through the mediator?
not
Was
through the
mediation
mediator. The
over?
mediator was out of the picture. So, and they kept negotiating, kept talking about it.
Oh,
And sometimes that happens. And I've seen
yes,
a lot of
it
cases
does.
where they just need to, they're not going to reach a settlement at mediation, but the discussions between attorneys continue right up to trial. And
This
this
is
is one
true.
of those settings where the mediator's out of the picture. There's not a lot we can do to help. But
Yes.
I was consulted by one of these people about the settlement. I'm like, you need to be really careful here because this is unreasonable. It is not what it's clearly not what they were discussing.
Right.
And for the person that wants to enforce this settlement, because he says it's in writing, the lawyer signed it, the email makes it a contract, you need to be very careful and understand that equity still matters.
Right. And I couldn't agree more. However, let me say this. This does take it out of the realm of mediation.
Yes.
Right? The mediator could not speak to this. And now, whereas sometimes in mediation, if for whatever reason it doesn't work and you have to let the parties move forward and you want to be helpful. And so you'll say, all right, I won't file my mediator report. Let's continue the dialogue through email. Now that is a mediation issue. In this
Absolutely.
case, it wasn't. So
And the main point
right.
that I was trying to make here is that even if you have a settlement and that is not clearly what it's supposed to be, there are vehicles to deal with that.
Yeah.
Settlements can be set aside. And that was the primary point here, is that while we want to get it right the first time, a mistake is not always fatal.
Yeah, true. It's absolutely true. The other side is if it does go through mediation, however, right? It is going to be much more probable to be enforceable. Now, I'm taking out any of the issues you were talking about, but because we did it in mediation, the court is going to give great deference to a mediated agreement, setting aside the issues that why a court could invalidate agreement. That's not what I mean to say and talk about. But great examples. I told you, Joe, we could go the whole way with this one. Nelson and then Linda, and then I'm going to turn the attention to why I know that Don showed up today, because he does improv. Go ahead, Nelson, please.
I went to college with a guy who's now a billionaire, and his favorite expression is, "I'm a son of a bitch, but I'm honest." That was his favorite expression. And I always adopted that in what I do. And, people will tell you they don't like me because I'm brutally honest. And not in a mediation generally, but in other walks of life. And in this situation, I have to tell you, Joe, that this public adjuster is a piece of crap. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why. There are two reasons. Number one, he referred the matter to an attorney. He didn't have to do that.
Did he do
He
that,
could have
Joe? He
said,
referred it to an attorney? Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's not cool.
Well, I don't know if he asked him for a referral or what, but the name that he gave me that he said he talked that his client talked to is one that he always brings up in mediation
There you
that
go.
does
Yeah,
his
this was all
opinions
There you
PA.
and
go.
those
Yeah, the
kind of
PA
things.
He
was saying,
referred. He referred. Okay. He
He
didn't
did
have to
inquire
do
to see if
that.
he could enforce it.
He didn't have to do that. He could have said, look, client, if you're going to take this ridiculous position, I'm not going to jump on board. Okay.
right.
You find yourself your own damn attorney. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
but
going to make a
Nelson,
motion for
I hear you, I know,
reformation.
but let's be honest. We're going to be dealing with unscrupulous individuals,
I understand that, but I don't
and
have to deal with him
no, you don't.
anymore.
No, no, no,
The
no, you don't.
second thing is, in addition to the fact that there was one other thing. Wait, now I've forgotten. In addition to the fact that he referred, there's also the fact that these are non-binding mediations. If his client didn't like the $19,000 within 3 days
3 days,
after the mediation,
right?
he had the opportunity to back out.
Hmm.
And that was his, and the adjuster could have said to him, look, you don't like it, back out, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
But
Hold, hold,
don't
hold,
get my friend Joe in trouble.
Yeah, I know, but one, let's let one, by the way, that 3 day rule, that is specific to DFS mediations in this regard that we are talking about, one. And secondly, I've just met unscrupulous, in this case, public adjusters. This is part of what you get. Likewise, you may have unrepresented or pro se parties who simply they don't, hey Arlene, they don't know better. And they may argue things. And anyway, the point of the matter is, as mediators, there are things we will be having to deal with, FYI. And I know it's upsetting, but the other thing that Joe, I remember you and I talking about was that, well, you know what? Maybe they weren't really trying to get 19 or whatever $1 million. Maybe they were just trying to get a few more $1,000s out of Joe and the insurance carrier, which seems more likely, FYI. But still, what a pain in the butt, and it caused some agita to Joe as well. Not fun. Linda, please. And I agree with that, Nelson. Yeah, honesty and our reputation is important. Please.
Okay. Well, something Nancy mentioned that now raises my antenna.
Yeah.
She was talking about the terms of the agreement.
Yeah.
So if we have a $19,000, payout, for lack of better words, agreement, in the mediation agreement, in the terms,
Yeah,
it's going to say how that's paid, when it's paid.
it should.
Are there installments? Is it a check? Is it a loan? How or are they going to trade assets?
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that because the terms are going to be in the mediation agreement, that this $1 million error would pop out. So am I missing something here?
Right. Well, I think, and I'm not going to speak for Nancy. Well, I'll let her answer. But my sense is that in Nancy's case, the case that she's potentially talking about is there was the terms were not specific like we all talk about. They were a lot more general, and then each side is arguing a different position based on the non-specificity of the agreement. Nancy, please.
Right. So what I'm saying then is that the mediation agreement did not.
Well, it wasn't a mediation agreement, by the way. This happened after mediation. There was actually a settlement.
Okay. The settlement, it did not go into enough detail, and we need to be concerned about that.
For mediators, I think so. But Nancy, what are your thoughts? Nancy? She may be trying to. Nancy will answer when you're able to. But Nelson is saying, we have to document all material portions of the agreement. Specificity is the order of the day. We need not general language. You put in general language, and they're going to come back. It's not going to be potentially enforceable. Your parties are going to argue. Our job is to make sure that with specificity, the terms of the agreement are who, what, where, when, why, in detail. That's our job, so that this doesn't happen. Nancy, were you going to say something, or I'll wait until?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. I've had trouble unmuting myself on the phone. So in any event, in this case, the problem was that litigation had been filed, and they agreed to dismiss the case with prejudice. The problem is that there were two questions in the case, not just the foreclosure, but the enforcement of an agreement. And one side is saying that we're going to dismiss the case, and they're thinking the foreclosure case we're done, and the other information was just incidental to the foreclosure case. And the other side is thinking everything in the complaint is done now, where the case is dismissed. And that dismiss the case with prejudice is the sticking point, because if the case is dismissed with prejudice, then the terms other than the foreclosure might not be enforceable, and that's where the hundreds of thousands of dollars comes in. So again, when lawyers talk in shorthand, be specific. Make sure that if something is being dismissed, you're clear as to what's being dismissed. You just have to be very, very careful in your language and be precise.
Now, thank you, Nancy, for that. If you're the mediator, right, what is your job? Is it appropriate to point out, hey, should we be a little more specific here? What are your thoughts, counsels about X, Y, and Z? Absolutely, it is, right? So the more experience we have, the better we are at helping the parties do that kind of thing. And when you do that appropriately, counsels will, and the parties will be very, very appreciative, right? So our job is to be, which will, great discussion, everybody. Joe, I told you it was going to be a really, really good discussion, right? I told you. And
I think Nelson's more mad than I am.
Well, but Nelson, let's be honest. The things that are upsetting him, do they not upset us all? I have been very upset, any one of a number of times, and in fact, livid sometimes, right? But I would do it after, FYI, and it's just part of what we have to do. But I will say, at the end, when somebody gives me a really, really hard time, so mediators, we also have to build our business. We have to market, right? And so every time I work with a new attorney, for instance, and this is an easy one, I'm going to take their name and their contact information, I'm going to put it into my ongoing, email marketing. If I had a really bad experience, from time to time, I will choose not to put them in there. I do not have to mediate with them again. And there are some that I don't, you know what? I don't want to mediate with them. I can be choosy now. Go ahead. And then let me jump into go ahead.
This is just to answer Joe. Joe, a carrier in New York would not hire you again if they got sued in court.
So there's good lessons for everybody here.
My
FYI.
client was
why
very
I
gracious.
get angry. And that's why I got angry, because you're going to lose that client if they get sued.
Yeah.
And to his point, right, because of the unprofessional demeanor and work product and just the way some of these public adjusters work, somebody else is going to be potentially inadvertently or purposely affected. That's wrong. And we don't have to deal with those folks, but it is part of being a mediator, and a neutral. Let's be honest, it's having to deal with those folks effectively in order to still help them potentially get to some kind of settlement. And then, our job, what is our job? Right. So let's let this kind of lead us into what I brought us here to talk about. We're clearly going to be going over everybody. If you have to, and so I'll continue it next week as well for us. But okay, so I'm talking to my group of students at FAMU for a mediation theory and practice class this last week. Fun class. I had a blast. And you know me, I'm using my hands and you know all of the tools in my tool belt. And at the end of class, you know, one of the students, an older, more experienced, you know, individual who I also happen to know, has had training and done other kinds of things because are we not a product of all of our life experiences? And they happened to have gone to professional clown school. They've done, you know, improvisational comedy as well, which Don, I happen to know you have done as well. And so at the end, he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Professor, did you ever get training as a clown or as sounds funny, right? Or an improv?" But I knew what he was saying because of you know having talked you know through the class. And he says, and this was the part that was really funny that kind of stuck out to me. He said, "Oh, that's interesting. Look, see, Nelson was a child actor. I love it. That's really quite amazing. There's so many facets to all of us, right? That's really cool, Nelson. Love. We'll hear about it." He continued and he said, "You know, there were aspects of the way you were talking to us in class that were clown-like." Now, right off the bat, when you say it like that, it almost sounds like an insult. But on the contrary, it wasn't an insult. I immediately understood what he was saying. He was saying the kinds of characteristics and the kinds of skill sets that any one of a number of professions need in order for someone to be effective, right? If they're good at it, that means they have some really good skill sets. And so immediately I loved it. And I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. And I was actually, I took it as a compliment immediately. I knew what he was saying. And so we had a nice discussion about it afterwards. He also happens to be a martial artist. And so there's a lot of things that mediators share in common with other professions, right? But specifically when he said, and what I loved about it was a clown. An improv, a comedian, you know, improv. What if you think right off the top of your bat? Where are there similarities in that regard, right? What does he mean? So let's start by Don. You do improv. Where are the similarities between improv and mediation?
Well, improv, and actually, just to touch on what you talked about,
Yeah.
as a mediator or and in any profession, there are a number of side skills that can be advantageous to your career, to your ability to communicate with people. I know back in the 80s, I took a magic class or a series of classes on magic, again, trying to be able to build relationships with people that I encounter in business. You know, the same thing with comedy. I've done, you know, with Jay Leno, with Adam Carolla. I've done classes with these folks, and you learn, you know, standing, how to present yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You learn about how not to talk too much, get to the point, how to build humor, you know, how to read an audience. And ultimately, for us as a mediator, I know Ty, you and I just did a mediation
Oh, yeah.
together,
Yeah.
and I noted as I was watching this guy that behind him was an entirely huge trophy case with a whole bunch of trophies in it. You know, being aware of your surroundings is part of the skill set of
Yeah. Well said.
improv.
Right.
And ultimately, as mediators, we want to build relationships with both the parties so that they trust us to try and take them over the hurdles of a natural negotiation.
And how
But
we do that?
actually, and there are, all of you are here. I mean, there's classes offered at comedy clubs in Sarasota and Orlando, all throughout the state, that if you just wanted to take a class, not actually get up on stage, even though that typically is part of a class, building that presence and comfort, you know, being in front of people. But as mediators, we pretty much have already developed our comfort stage in presenting with folks. But you could take those, and they usually are just a couple $100, unless you want to go $5,000, $10,000 for the big ones out in LA. But
well, I think we're always improving upon, you know, our skills, FYI. Well said, though. Finish, and then let me. Linda was going to say something, and then I'm going to kind of start taking us through this.
Well, ultimately, I think from improv and learning that art, part of it is how to write a joke, how to keep things concise. If you take too much time trying to be funny or try to build a relationship, you end up having a counterproductive conversation. And we probably have all seen that where somebody takes too long to get to the point that started off sounding good, but you end up losing the audience. So I think basically for all of us, learning that aspect, getting those classes on improv can be very beneficial to help you just, in retrospect, look at how you communicate.
I love how you ended on that. How we communicate is so important. And by the way, we had a great class, a great mediation together, Don, you and I. And we co-mediated it, and it was Don's skills. It was his just comfort with finance and numbers that and him feeding it to me, right? And me just taking it, and they didn't know that Don was giving it to me. That made a difference, right, Don? It helped us move past the BS. And even though we didn't come to agreement, we came dang close, right? FYI. And it was, if you think about it, it was Don's ability and comfort and knowledge in one field, right? That was able to be used well. And they didn't know Don was giving it to me. They had no idea, but we worked well together. So there's collaboration. FYI, right? There's timing. I could go on, and it was, and I loved it. I loved it. Don, wasn't it a great experience? It really, really was.
Oh, I mean, it was fun, and it's always fun. Actually, I think we're all mediators because we enjoy mediating. Actually, what's the most ironic thing about this was that one of the parties happened to have the same last name as I do, and so every time would say Mr. Wyatt, I kept turning my head like, okay, is he talking to me? You find those weird situations, but what are the odds of running into a situation like that? Now, Linda
that's right.
Smith, you probably see that a lot.
Right, Smith. Thank you, Don. Linda, what was you were going to say something?
Well, I think a good improv, one of the benefits is that they know how to think on their feet.
Oh, absolutely.
And agreed. I mean, really, I've been to some bad ones, and I've been to some really good ones, and I was amazed.
Mediation or a comedy act? I'm joking. I know.
No, comedy act. No, and I've been amazed at what the skilled ones can come back with in just a couple of seconds of time.
Yeah.
So that can really help a mediation.
Agreed.
Bring down the temperature a little bit, diffuse a situation.
Yeah.
Now, for me personally, I would be afraid that I would not laugh, but maybe smirk in an appropriate way. If I had that kind of training, I would be very aware that, be careful what skills you use. But I think that's one of the strong assets to a good improv is that they can very well think on their feet.
Yeah, well said. And sounds like mediation to me, isn't it? We're thinking on our feet. You're right there, Don. All the time. All the time. We are flying by the seat of our pants, and you're reacting to things. Don said in the background there were, at one point, Don, said to me, "Hey, we can build rapport. Ask about the things in the back." And sometimes you might want to do that. As I recall, we got so lost in the kind of weeds and the details that I didn't. But in that instance, I didn't necessarily need to, because sometimes we do that on purpose, FYI. But isn't that the point, right, Linda? It sounds, remember when I joked and I said, well, I mean, you're talking about a mediation, you're talking about a comedy act. I knew what you were talking about, but it could be either one, couldn't it? Yes, it could. Don, what were your thoughts? And then I'm gonna go through some skills, and this is not an all-encompassing list of skills of clowns and comedians, and then go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I mean, just tagging on to what Linda said, I've opened for a comedian, J.C. Clark, who's done over 10,000. He was a comic in New York that, for those live TV shows, the different talk shows and things like that for many, many years. And his form of comedy was a constant unknown. He would ask questions of the audience. Now, he never knew what he was going to get as an answer, but he had to keep aware of what was going on and find humor to make everybody else in the room laugh regarding that. Whether it's, somebody, oh, this guy's part of the mafia, and he would keep going back because he saw how the audience reacted to that, or whatever.
Instinctually reacting to what's taking place.
So when you see comics that deal with the audience more, they have to be very much aware, like us as a mediator.
Yeah.
A typical comedian will have a set, planned jokes and things like that, which is very different. We have a toolbox of some jokes that we may use, but we have to have the awareness of that comedian who works the audience. And you're constantly dealing with something new. You find humor, and you have to know what humor is appropriate or inappropriate.
Absolutely. Right. To Linda's point, which skill do I use? Would I react? When would I not react? We mediators, we have to be very careful, right? If you think about it, somebody says something in front of the other party at their expense. It might be funny as heck. It might be revolting. You better not react inappropriately, right? In front of the parties, we have to be more stoic. We have to be we have to be more objectively neutral. It's when we go into individual caucus where we can be subjectively neutral, and then the same joke could have a different response, but it's knowing your audience, knowing what the situation is, situational awareness. So, and it's your instincts telling you, informing you. So with Don, when Don said, he opened for someone who'd done 10,000 shows, what does that comedian have? Experience. He's stepped in it a million times. He's seen things work, not work. He's combining stuff. His instincts are informing his performance. Same thing for a mediator, right? And so we need to practice. That's how we get better. And you learn to trust your instincts. See, this is what I really love about looking at the things that make other professionals successful. What can I learn from that? How can I turn that into what I do? I love doing that. By the way, I'm going to share this document that I have with you at the end. I really like the infographics on LinkedIn sometimes. If any of you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll forward them, and I'll forward the ones that aren't mediator specific, but that are talking about things that I see parallels in mediation, right? So I love to look at them and think, well, what are they trying to say here? How can I apply that? How do I do that? What can I learn from this? We're always working to make ourselves better as people, as mediators, as professionals. So let's look at, thank you, everybody. Great comments. Some skills professional clowns possess, and I'm sure there are many others. But this was just a clown layman looking online and trying to find some skills. But a strong ability to make people laugh through exaggerated physical comedy. Matter of fact, that was one of the things that the law student brought up to me. He said, everyone always says, and you see my hands. My wife's like, Ty, your hands, they're really distracting. But I move around the room. I'm very I'm a lot more physical. I'm from New York. Maybe that's what it is. Like Nelson, I don't know. But when you make an exaggerated motion, what are you doing? There's a point to the exaggerated motion. I'm trying to highlight something. I'm using a lot of different tools, right? A quick wit. Don, please.
Yeah, I actually, just to go that an exaggeration. Sometimes I've used, it depends on, you have to read the audience, but I'll go, okay, will you settle, as you're starting this off and you get into the private caucus, would you settle this for $1 million? And of course the person says, oh, for $1 million, of course.
Or 19 million in Joe's case.
Yeah. Or would you settle this for 4,000? Well, no, I wouldn't settle. what kind of person do you think I am? This is worth so much more. I'm like, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure you're willing to settle something. So I exaggerate something, get them to laugh a little bit at themselves, but I establish so there is a negotiation that can be made. Actually, it goes back to an old joke where a man walks up to a beautiful woman and says, "Oh my God, would you have sex with me for $1 million?" And the woman looks at him and says, "Well, for $1 million, sure." Then he says, "How about 20 bucks?" And she says, "Wait a minute, what kind of girl do you think I am?" He's like, "We've already established that. We're now just negotiating the price."
Next time you tell that one with this group, just turn it around and make it a guy who was being propositioned by a woman.
Well, it could go either way.
But what's the joke? There's a point to the joke, right? Your instincts may inform you. And is it appropriate to use a joke in mediation? Maybe. Sometimes you got to be careful, right? But it could be appropriate. How will you know? Your instincts will inform you, because we have to practice to be good at anything, right? A quick wit, character development, adaptability to different audiences. We're doing that all of the time. Excellent stage presence. Important additional juggling, magic. Don, you said magic, balloon artistry, acrobatics. What other skills? Where do you get other skills from? Right, Don, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say first off that joke about the girl at the bar. I would not tell that in a real mediation.
I know.
But my point there is I took that joke and recognized the point there where we had to go with negotiation and created a version within a negotiation or within a mediation perspective. Would you accept $1 million to settle this case?
That's the point.
To set up the fact is that we've actually established we're all here. There is a number that we can all agree to. So you can find jokes that you watch if you're watching Netflix, or jokes that other people tell that might be inappropriate in a mediation, but the concept of the joke, the point that they get across, you can change to use it in a mediation. So, right. I mean, there's a lot of draw from watching comedy.
Yeah. And just in that moment, like, for instance, what you just said, and I said, or 19 million in Joe's case, a quick little, but what am I also doing? If I get them to chuckle, you're creating some rapport. You're also, you could be doing any one of a number of things, and it's case by case. And you're following your instincts. Linda, please. Thank you, sir. Linda, were you gonna? Well,
yeah, there we are. Okay, there we are. John, yes, I'm glad you follow up with that as far as that joke being may not be appropriate. And we're talking about reading the room and having a way of presenting something for a settlement, as that's what you were trying to do. Because I'm going to put my opinion out here and say that I found that joke very offensive. And I would have to try to find another way to present that. But I think you made your point. And I'm glad that you sort of retracted that and said that would not be something you would necessarily say. So we do have to, draw the line between the comedy and the mediation.
I'm glad you said that, for any one of a number of reasons. Not specifically just because of the audience that we have here, but in mediation, could that joke have been appropriate? You know what? Off the top of my head, I would say no. But what if you're in with somebody and they're just very raunchy? Maybe with that individual, it might be, what I'm trying to tell you all is, in any given situation, you all you're alone, you're on your own, and you have to figure out what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate, and you're going to follow your instincts. What if you're wrong? You might be wrong. You will be wrong one day. You're going to step in it. Stepping in it is a good thing, not a bad thing, because it teaches us, right? And so you're wrong, you admit it, and then you move on, but not before, right? But sometimes your instincts are right on point. So while it's great to have this discussion, the point of the matter is different case by case, right? You're going to use different things based on the audience, who, the individual you're in with, the two parties in front of you, the attorney you're talking to, FYI, right? And we're always doing this, FYI. And we have to be considerate and careful. And you might say the wrong thing. That's okay. Fix it and then move on, FYI, right? So it was I'm happy. I love that it came up if you think about it, right? They're always maintaining a positive demeanor and a positive and engaging demeanor. Sounds like a mediator to me. I'm always maintaining a positive and engaging demeanor. Skilled at reading a crowd and adjusting their performance accordingly. Sounds like what we're doing as well. Sounds like what we were just talking about, if you think about it. Let's go on to improvisational comedian. Listens deeply and picks up on nonverbal cues. Sounds like a mediator to me. Flexible with an ability to respond quickly and genuinely. Sounds like a mediator to me. Flexibility? Matter of fact, the rules speak to mediators are supposed to be procedurally flexible. An ability to respond quickly? We have to respond immediately sometimes. Emotions? You have to respond immediately. Someone says something, pisses off the other individual, maybe it's time to caucus. Being genuine, authenticity, the way you show up, a creative imagination, and being quick on their feet. Linda, I think you were talking about being quick on your feet, creative imagination. So do we not have to come up with solutions? Out of the box thinking. Do we not have to do it fast sometimes? Yes. Collaborative, works well with others. That's what a mediator does, right? We have to be able to work with everybody. I thought this one was interesting too. Yes, and accepts what others say rather than shutting them down. Happens all the time. Even if you don't agree, maybe especially if you don't agree with somebody. Well, yeah, I see your point. And that makes me, and the point is, we keep it going, right? We do this all the time. Trustworthy, self-assured. I like to say perceived value. A lot of what we do is perceived value, right? So the way you show up, right? If you sound like $1 million, look like $1 million, and you can back it up with being able to actually perform, right? But people are always making judgments on us, right? So we have to be putting that best foot forward. Even when you're unsure, you're not going to let them see it. Trustworthy, we have to be genuine. We have to be, we are always building rapport. We have to be transparent, right? We have to we have to build rapport and get them to trust us. A risk taker, not afraid to fail. That sounds like mediation as well. We have to know when to be letter of the law, when to be spirit of the law, and when to be a maverick, when to do something that seems inappropriate at first glance, but because everyone is willing to say it, because everyone is willing to maybe go down that road, and or saying an off-color joke to the right individual. So forgive me, but Nelson, if Nelson was a client and Don said it to him, Nelson, would you have been? Don't answer, please. I'm going to make it. Maybe he wouldn't have been. Maybe he would have laughed. If Linda's his client, Don would have said something else. What's the point? The point is you're reading the room and you're going to say something if you think it will be helpful. I have told my wife, this and this and this happened, and I said this, and she said, you did what? I said, I know, but it went off just fine. Point of the matter is you're listening to your instincts, right? Ability to relate to the audience. I do this all the time. The art of chit chat. I'm trying to find commonality with parties, right? Especially in those moments when you can't talk about the case for some reason. A party has an attorney, their attorney steps out, you come back in the room, attorney's not there. Can you talk about the case? You better talk about something else and fill up that time well. Excuse me. Ability to recognize patterns in scenes, explore, play, and heighten them happens all of the time. Don was saying, Ty, did you see in back he had the trophies? Don picked up on that. We're picking up cues all of the time, right? We have to be very, very observant, and we're using everything and anything at our disposal. They can win their audience over. Come on, that's part of the job, isn't it? They come in and they're nervous as heck. They're mad as heck. They're timid as they don't trust you. They don't trust the process. And you have to win them over. How do you do that? Slowly but surely. A little different for everybody. Was somebody going to say something? Knows that they need to practice. Everybody needs to practice. That's how you get good, right? When you think, oh, I'm perfect, that's when I'm going to start to worry. We're always continuously honing our craft, whatever it is that you do. Being open to feedback. We better be open to feedback. Right? I love criticism. I want criticism. I want to get better. Emotional intelligence? Really? A comedian? Don, you need emotional intelligence as a comedian? That's weird. Of course, no, it's not. Of course we need EQ. It's just so interesting to me. And these were just skills that just in looking over skill sets for comedians, improvisational comedians and clowns that I was able to come up with. But what I loved about them was each of those are needed by mediators, right? So the question is, do these sound like skills needed by a mediator? And let me ask you all, in your minds, so what are skills that make good mediators? Either put them in the chat box or the floor is yours, everybody. Okay, let me keep on going because I have a list for you. Just jump on in. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, one of the things that you talked about is, stage presence and being able to deal with it. Sure. As, a comic, you have to deal, and everybody's familiar with hecklers.
Oh, yeah, right? I love it.
Okay. So, I mean, if you watch comedians that are, dealing with their audience, dealing with hecklers, that can also help you deal with the situation because we're going to have parties, we're going to have attorneys, we're going to have different people that will challenge the mediator.
Absolutely.
That will challenge the entire process.
Absolutely.
Right. And we have to
find when someone doesn't want to caucus, for instance. No, right. I don't want to caucus. Something like that. I hear you. I love it.
I actually, one of the things I know in a mediation, somebody, I really don't need to settle this today. I can do it tomorrow. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. You can. I said, but it reminds me of a man that walked into a bar and he sat down, he ordered a drink, and he saw behind the bar free drinks tomorrow. He says, oh my God, I'm going to come back tomorrow. And the bartender said the sign will still be there.
That happened to me, actually. I went the next day and he goes, no, it's tomorrow.
Right. That's the whole point of it, is that tomorrow never actually comes because the sign for tomorrow will be tomorrow will be tomorrow. That's and right. It never reached. But yes, I mean, use comedy. Next time you watch a comedian or stand-up comedy, think about the humor that's being used, how that person is reading the audience or preparing his material to see how it might relate. I told the joke earlier that something more of a locker room type joke is very inappropriate. But here we're about candor, we're about using things, and how I transposed something that was very offensive into something that wasn't, but got the humor apart, got the point across that, hey, we're here, you can negotiate. It's just a matter of getting to the point.
And thank you, sir. You get better at it, and better and better and better, which is why we practice. Just like a clown.
Self-deprecating humor.
Oh, man.
Very good.
Nelson, speak to that. I love that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I know you're angry. And I'm angry too. But look what it did to me. I'm 25. And look how old and ugly I look from all that anger.
It's funny. That's good. I love it. I use that too. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yes. Yes.
Look what anger did for me.
Pointing to yourself, you can deflect and you can say what you need to say sometimes. Well said, well said, well said. But you got to know when to use it. you're going to say it. You're going to say that in an appropriate moment because your instincts, your reading of the room, because in that moment, that's what makes sense because you're quick on your feet. We could go on and on and on. That's a great point, Nelson. I use it up from time to time as appropriate.
You're not here to settle the case. Okay. So you're just here to make a contribution to the Timken Florida Vacation Fund. That's good too.
That might not work with everybody, but it does once in a blue moon. Oh, let me give everybody an example. One of my Nelson, I'm really glad that you said this, right? It's just a great example, so to speak, and there's so many of them. One of my favorite movies, I don't know why, I can just watch it again. My favorite movie, and you can't remember, Wedding Crashers, right? I just love Wedding Crashers. Okay. Very inappropriate at times, but it's my movie and I enjoy it. And so the very first scene, does everyone know what their profession is, by the way? They're mediators, right? They are mediators. And there's this part where the sky miles come up, right? And so Vince Vaughn's character says, and hey, if you want to throw a couple of miles my way, hey, no problem. We'll take them. Something of that. I forget the exact line. Okay, so whoever does family mediations here, sky miles don't come up typically. But once in a blue moon, they do. And when they do, I go ahead and I say that. Unless my instincts say, Ty, don't use it in this one. But other than that, I just do it. And one of two things happens. Either they start laughing hilariously or they look at me like I have three heads, right? And I say, actually, I was just joking. It was a bad joke. My apologies. And I move forward. But whether or not I'm going to say it is I'm going to have to make that determination. But as soon as I see it, I will, I can say it. Am I going to say it? And sometimes when it works great. Here's one that I use every single time I mediate. At the end of be right there, Linda, at the end of mediation. And by the way, be careful using that one, everybody, because we're not supposed to get payment, right? But it's a joke. At the end of mediation, I will always look to the parties, represented or not, and I'll say, Mr. So-and-so, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, I hope I never see you again. And everybody always laughs. Why? They know they don't want to see me again either, now do they? And then I'll say, counsel, I look forward to working with you, but everybody always laughs. Why? They know what I mean in that regard, right? Linda, please.
I don't think this is an area in mediation for the untrained.
Well said. Well said.
Agreed. I would, yeah, I would not attempt some of this at all. I think I would make a fool out of myself.
Well, but Linda, we're right. You're using your instincts. We're not saying, hey, every time you see sky miles, say this joke. That's not what we're saying. Right? FYI. And everybody, jokes are not appropriate in mediation, but sometimes they are. Self-deprecation works often enough. You're going to use your instincts, my friends, right? So, Linda, right? We're not telling you to do it. What we're saying is.
Right, but we have to recognize that Don has years and years of experience in this. Mm-hmm. And it's like a lot of things, you just can't like jump in there and try to pick up something he said and try to use it in your own mediation.
Agreed.
I think there's a real skill to this. Mm-hmm. And we're certainly aware that it's another option that we can use in mediation. But again, I have to say it's not for me. I'm not trained in this area.
No, yeah, I hear you. But please, we're not talking about using comedy in mediation, everybody. The reason that I brought it up, or bringing in a red nose to mediation, or big clown shoes, that's not the reason I brought this up. The reason I brought it up was because if you think about it, if I didn't know that this student, very experienced older individual, is also trained in professional clown school and does improvisational comedy, when they said, you seem to have very clown-like, tendencies, I knew what they were talking about. If they would have said that, if somebody would have said that to me out of the blue, I would have been like, what the hell did you mean by that? Like, I might have been offended, but I wasn't offended in this regard. And because it almost seems outlandish how our clown skills and comedian skills, how can they serve a mediator well? It's not the ability for slapstick humor or the ability to tell a good joke. It's the skill sets by which they need to become good at what they do. That's what's important here, FYI. That we happen to be saying you can use a joke now and again. Linda, I'm going to go out on a limb here. You're not a brand new mediator. I'm sure you've laughed in mediation once or twice, or chuckled, or there's been a humorous situation that you've allowed yourself to either chuckle with somebody or you've held your composure. Why? Because in that moment, you had to react or not react. That's the point of the matter. So I'm glad you're saying this, Linda. Everybody, we are not saying use humor in mediation. What we're saying is the skill sets that allow someone to use humor well are very similar to the skill sets that allow a mediator to be good, because the only way you can tell a damn good joke, the only way you can give a damn good, facilitate a damn good process is with experience. That's the point, right? FYI. Thank you for saying that, Linda. I really appreciate it. So would you all agree with these skill sets for a good mediator? That is situational awareness. Should a mediator have good situational awareness, be aware of what's going on? I think so.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. For any one of a number of reasons. We have to make sure people are safe in a lot of different contexts. What if somebody says something inappropriate? What if somebody does something inappropriate? What if there's some kind of domestic violence? What if there's a power imbalance? We could go on and on. We need to know, what if somebody, I've told this sometimes, I thought I smelled alcohol on somebody's breath, right? So I'm wondering, are they drunk? But they seem perfectly fine. I asked my supervisor during a break, my supervisor says, well, ask them if they're diabetic. Sometimes when someone's going into ketosis, their breath smells like alcohol. I asked, and then sure enough, they told me, yes, I am. So I kept going. Now, years later, in a training, when I told that story, someone with a health background, who was, I believe she was a nurse, or he was a nurse, said to me, Ty, by the way, there's something you're not thinking about here. If you smell that, if they are a diabetic, if they are going into ketosis, they need something. Something could be happening to them. Their sugar may be too high or too low. So now I know that not only do I have to worry about them having what? What are we talking about? Capacity to come to agreement. If they're drunk, can they sign? If they're high, can they sign? No. But now, because of my experience, I now also know if I see that and it's not, they do have capacity. Do I need to give them a break? So you see, right? This makes us better and better and better and better and better. Diana and then Don. Hey, Diana. Well, let us know when you can then, Diana. Don?
Yeah, okay. Something I just thought to add, we talk about clowns, comedians. I think the other thing we should put in this category is also ministers. Linda, you talk about not comfortable telling jokes and things like that, but a minister, presents. I mean, one of the things that I use, sometimes when there's an argument about a physical asset, a car, is, King Solomon would just solve this by cutting the car in half. I said, now I'm not quite sure what either one of you would do with a half of a car that doesn't run. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're here. We've got to find a solution, because
I've referred to King Solomon in mediation.
Yep. I think many of us.
Baby. Yeah. Yep. Many of us probably have.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's also the minister. And Linda, you might, as you mentioned, you're not comfortable with comedy, but you find a calling, you find a way to take and communicate. And that's a comic with a joke, a clown with a red nose. everybody's taking information and figuring out a way to use it.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Bible, which there are many courses. I mean, actually, some of the training I've had is in Christian conciliation. So
I've trained ministers to be mediators.
Mm-hmm.
And they are mediators, I think.
Yeah, but I have to apologize, guys, because I have to
go. By the way, Don, thank you for everything. I appreciate it. Everybody, look, it is 10:18. I don't want to keep you. Last thing I want is for your significant other to get mad at you or me. FYI. Don, thank you. Go ahead, Diana.
Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry. I was having a hard time finding the unmute button. It wasn't like I was hitting the bottom of the screen and it wasn't popping up.
Diana, one second. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to keep this up next week as well, everybody. Go ahead, Diana.
Okay, so what I think is that for both comedy and humor, to work, you have to have the same basis of knowledge and come from the same thing. So something an American might find funny, a German might not.
Oh, good point.
Right? Yeah. So you have to have
your audience.
The same. Yeah, but it's a little bit beyond the audience, knowing the audience. It's about the culture, the mores, and stuff like that. So as a mediator, you have to know that too, especially if you're dealing with an international or whatever, where the man is more dominant in the relationship or whatever it is. You just have to be aware of the nuances of the cultural norms for the people that you are dealing with.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well said. Absolutely. In any one of a number of different respects, right? We have to be flexible. We have to be able to reach our audience in a way that we can make a connection. We have to be respectful. We have to know boundaries. Point is, the mediator has to be very, 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 very cognizant of what's going on, right? Of themselves, of the parties. Go ahead.
So another point that I made in the chat was that all three of these professions are actually goal-oriented. They have different goals, but they're goal-oriented. So the comedian or comic and the clown want to entertain the people. And so they might try something. If it's not going over, they've got to switch. They've got to switch in mid-gear. And so as a mediator, the goal
rather than entertainment. Go ahead. The goal
is not entertainment, but it's but it's to reach a settlement that both parties can agree to.
That's right.
And if you're going down one path and you're not making progress, you've got to find another path.
That's right.
To go down. That's right. To see if another path.
You have to be flexible. You have to be
flexible and to take in what's going on at the same time.
Well said. I could not agree more. Linda, I'm going to give it to you in just one moment. Everybody, I'm going to put this document in the chat box for you, okay? Feel free to look over it. Next week, we'll finish off, by the way. I'm going to be right there, Linda. And so what I did now was I wrote down a whole bunch of skills that are good for mediators. This is not an exhaustive list. And then what are the skills, the important skills shared by the three? And you can definitely add others, ministers and what have you to I'd like that one. And then what's the takeaway? What's my conclusion, right? And then look, there's still more. Again, I love infographics that speak to skill sets for other professions and what can we take away from them. So I have quite a few infographics that I've taken from that I love to take them off of LinkedIn specifically, and I put them here. Feel free to look through them. Emotional intelligence, communication, entrepreneurs, sales, leadership, right? Neuroscience, one of them was from. And how is it that they can help us be better? So feel free to look through it. And I'm going to go over the rest of this next week when we come back. I'm cognizant that it's Saturday. I don't want to keep you all here.
Hang on.
And thank you. Please, did you want to finish before I give it to Linda?
Yes. Oh, so I'm sorry. So I wanted to say that another thing is that the audience must perceive you as neutral or positively, or else you're not going to be able to get anywhere. And so you have to, as all of them. Of all of them. No, as a comic or a clown, if they think that you're a jerk, they're not going to laugh at your jokes. I'm sorry, I mean whatever. But I mean, all of them, you have to be neutral or seen in a neutral towards positive range in order to be able to, for actually to get anybody to listen to you, you have to be seen in that, because if you're seen negatively, people will dismiss you.
Like a
I
mediator,
think.
right?
Yeah,
If
the
they
media,
think
I mean,
you're impartial, that you're partial rather than impartial. We have to set the stage.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I think it applies to all three of them, that they have to be.
I think so.
And if you like try, let's say whatever, you're trying something out, either it's a joke or you're trying a strategy in the mediation, it's not working. I mean, you've got to fall back and try something else.
Yeah, and that's how we learn. It's by things not working, and then afterwards, you're like, oh man! And the next time you see it, because you've seen it, you're going to get better at it. Thank you so much, Linda. Go right ahead, please.
I think you set the tone and the comfort when you walk in the room, when you start the mediation and you're introducing the parties and you're introducing yourself before you even do your opening statement. I mean, I like to think when I come into a mediation that I'm not negative. I'm up, I'm beat. I'm here to listen to you, to try to figure out how we can best resolve this. And I hope that they pick up on an attitude that I really care about what happens. And that all starts the moment that you come together. It doesn't start halfway at the mediation or at the end of the mediation. It starts at the very beginning.
I could not agree with you more. How you show up, how the mediator shows up, is and how you present yourself throughout the mediation. So important. Absolutely. And of course, these are important, serious things that we're talking about, right? That I chose comedy and a clown. I did it purposely because they seem so juxtaposed. It's about the same kinds of skills that people need to be good at what they do, FYI. And so you know what? Really fast, everybody. In the chat box is this PDF, okay? You're going to be able to see it right now. But Linda, you're making me think that before I let anybody go, I want to share one more thing. And that is, well, wait, Ty, what is the takeaway, right? What are the important skills that a clown, a comedian, and a mediator do share? It's, and you were hitting on it, Linda, right? It's the active and empathetic listening. They all have to do it. They have to all be adaptable. They all have to have emotional intelligence, right? As I was working through this, what I came up with, and there's more that I came up with, but the really important ones that stuck out to me, and each of you might have a different take, it's that the foundation, look at what I wrote here. It seemed to me that empathic listening, active and empathic listening, right, is foundational to the connection that we make with our parties. Mediators do that. That's fundamental to mediation, right? Clowns do it. Comedians do it. Your minister does it. Your doctor does it. Everybody does that. Your dentist, your nurse, right? Your financial advisor should be doing that. Adaptability, right? The art of flexibility is inherent in every single profession. To do it well, you have to be flexible. You have to adapt to what's going on in front of you. Everyone is different. Oh, I got to get going because my boss just told me. Last thing, emotional intelligence is essential for navigating human complexity. All three of those have these three at their core. You want to be a good mediator? There's many, many, many. For me, and you each need to be the mediator you need to be. For me, these three are the core three shared by clown, comedian, and a mediator. You could insert any one of a number of others into clown and comedian. We're mediators here. That's what we're talking about. And it would still be the same, right? So let me stop sharing. Everybody, great job. I had so much fun with that. Thank you all for amazing comments. I'll see you next week, and we'll keep on going. I hope you enjoyed that. I did. I'll see you soon. Thank you all so very much. Great job, Nelson. Thank you, Linda. You great comments. Everybody's comments were just amazing. Nancy and Diana and Don. Thank you. Have a great week. Go be superheroes, okay? And what we do makes a difference.
Ty, you have to, since you just said that, you have to show them your shirt, since you just said it goes to be superheroes.
Super mediator. How did you know I had that on?
Because I saw you right before we started.
That's right.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Happy New Year. Thank you, everybody. Great job.
Ty, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. What a great group we are. I'll see you soon, everybody. Stay well. Bye-bye.
Yeah, great group. Bye-bye.